The Zetharian survey ship glided through the darkness of space like a silver needle threading through black cloth. Captain Vesisthor stood on the bridge, his pale blue skin reflecting the soft glow of the control panels. His species had explored 1,000 worlds, documented 10,000 species, and never once encountered anything they feared. The Zetharians were scientists, peaceful observers who mapped the galaxy with careful precision. "Captain, we are approaching the third planet from the star," the navigator announced, her voice carrying the musical quality all Zetharians possessed. "Initial scans show abundant life. Oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere, water covering 70% of the surface." Vesithor nodded, his long fingers dancing across the holographic display. Radio signals crackled through their receivers, primitive but unmistakable. This world had intelligent life. Another species to catalog, to study, perhaps to welcome into the greater galactic community. "Prepare the landing party," Vesithor ordered. "Standard first contact protocols. We land in a remote area, observe and only approach if they seem receptive." Lieutenant Kree, the ship's security officer, checked his scanner. Unlike most Zetharians, Kree had served in the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. He knew that not every species welcomed visitors with open arms. "Captain, I recommend we send drones first. We know nothing about this species." "Noted, Lieutenant, but our protocols have served us well for 3 centuries. We will proceed as planned." The landing craft descended through clouds that stretched like white blankets across the blue world. They selected a landing zone in the northern region, where their scans showed lower population density. Rolling green hills stretched in every direction, dotted with strange rectangular structures and crossed by thin black paths. The craft settled on soft ground near a cluster of hills. The landing party consisted of 6 Zetharians, including Vesthor and Kree. They wore their standard exploration suits, equipped with translators and scanners. The air outside registered as breathable, though slightly rich in oxygen compared to their homeworld. Vesithor stepped onto alien soil for the first time. The grass crunched softly under his boots. A cool wind blew across the hills, carrying strange scents. Everything seemed peaceful, perfect for first contact. Then they heard it. A sound rolled across the hills like thunder, deep, guttural, primal. It was a roar, but unlike anything in the Zetharian database. The sound carried rage, power, and something that made Vesithor's blood run cold despite his years of experience. "What was that?" one of the junior scientists whispered, her voice shaking. Kree immediately activated his scanner, sweeping the hillsides. "I'm detecting large concentrations of life forms, but the readings are confused." The sound came from that direction, approximately 2 kilometers away. Another roar erupted, this one answered by dozens more. The sounds layered over each other, creating a chorus of aggression that echoed across the landscape. The translator AI struggled to make sense of it, offering only basic interpretations: challenge, dominance, territorial warning. "These must be the apex predators of this world," Vesthor said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Perhaps we landed too close to their hunting grounds." A third wave of roars shattered the afternoon air, closer this time. Through his scanner, Vesithor saw heat signatures moving in coordinated patterns. Whatever these creatures were, they moved in groups. "Pack hunters, the most dangerous kind." "Captain, I strongly recommend we return to the ship," Kree said, his hand moving to his sidearm. "These are clearly dominant predators. The sentient species we detected might be prey animals hiding from these beasts." Vesithor wanted to argue, but another roar cut through his thoughts. This one sounded different, more controlled somehow, but no less terrifying. His evolutionary instincts, buried under centuries of civilization, screamed at him to flee. "Agreed. Back to the ship. We will observe from orbit and send drones." The landing party moved quickly but carefully back to their craft. The roars continued, sometimes distant, sometimes frighteningly close. As they sealed the hatch and lifted off, Vesthor looked down at the green hills below. Somewhere down there, massive predators ruled this world. He had been a xenologist for 40 years, but he had never felt such primitive fear. Back aboard the Whisper of Stars, the crew gathered in the analysis chamber. They played the recordings of the roars through the ship's speakers. Even filtered through technology, the sounds made several crew members flinch. "Computer, analyze the vocalizations," Vesithor commanded. The AI processed for several seconds before responding. Vocalizations consistent with territorial displays, aggression signals, and pack coordination. Estimated lung capacity suggests creatures of significant size. Psychological analysis indicates sounds designed to intimidate and frighten potential threats or prey. Designed to frighten, Cree repeated. These creatures weaponize fear through sound alone. The navigator pulled up additional scans of the planet. Captain, those radio signals we detected? They're coming from structures all across the planet. If there is a sentient species here, they've built a global civilization. Then where are they? Another crew member asked. Why did we only encounter these predator sounds? Vesthor stared at the planet rotating slowly on the view screen. Perhaps the sentient species lives underground, or in the oceans. They might have been forced into hiding by these surface predators. Or perhaps, Cree said quietly, the sentient species serves these predators. We've encountered symbiotic relationships before. Some species worship powerful predators as gods. The crew fell silent, contemplating this possibility, a world where thinking beings lived in the shadow of roaring monsters, perhaps offering tribute, perhaps serving as a food source during lean times. We need more information, Vesthor decided. Send drones to multiple locations. Keep them high and quiet. I want visual confirmation of these creatures before we make any further plans. Over the next 3 days, the drones returned disturbing footage. The roars came from multiple types of locations, sometimes from large bowl-shaped structures where thousands of small bipedal creatures gathered, sometimes from flat open areas where the bipeds ran in formation. The bipeds themselves were small, barely 2 meters tall, with pale or dark skin and minimal body hair. But nowhere in the footage could the Zetharians find the source of the roars. The massive predators remained hidden, perhaps emerging only at night, perhaps living in caves or forests the drones hadn't yet explored. This doesn't make sense, Cree said, studying the footage for the 100th time. We hear the roars clearly, but we never see what makes them. Maybe they're underground predators, suggested a junior scientist. Or they're camouflaged. Vesthor made his decision. We're leaving the system. We'll report our findings to the Galactic Council and let them decide how to proceed. This world is too dangerous for standard first contact protocols. As the Whisper of Stars engaged its faster-than-light drive, leaving Earth behind, none of the Zetharians realized their mistake. They had heard humanity's war cries, sporting cheers, and military cadences. They had heard the sounds humans made when training, competing, and bonding. They had heard humanity roar, but they never understood that the small bipeds and the roars were the same thing. They never realized that humanity was both the civilization and the monster, and that misunderstanding would change the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station called Harmony 7, where representatives from 200 species gathered to discuss matters of universal importance. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a sphere 300 meters across with seating arranged in concentric rings. Each species had their own environmental pod, customized for their atmospheric and gravitational needs. Captain Vesithor stood in the Zetharian pod, his hands trembling slightly as he prepared to present his findings. 3 weeks had passed since the Whisper of Stars had fled Earth's system. 3 weeks of analyzing data, reviewing recordings, and trying to understand what they had encountered. The Speaker of the Council, an ancient being whose species had achieved spaceflight when most others were still learning to make fire, called the session to order. The Zetharian delegation has requested emergency session to discuss a newly discovered world. Captain Vesithor, you may proceed. Vesithor activated the holographic display. Earth appeared in the center of the chamber, rotating slowly, looking deceptively peaceful. Honored Council members, we have discovered a world in Sector 447, third planet from a yellow star. Initial scans showed all markers of intelligent life, radio signals, atmospheric composition consistent with industrial civilization, architectural structures across the entire planet. He paused, knowing how his next words would sound. However, we were unable to make contact. The planet's surface is controlled by extremely aggressive apex predators. We have recorded their territorial calls. Vesthor played the audio. The roars echoed through the council chamber. He watched as delegates from peaceful species shifted uncomfortably. A few of the herbivore species actually fled their pods in panic, returning only when the audio ended. As you can hear, these predators use psychological warfare through sound alone. Our AI analysis suggests creatures of massive size operating in coordinated packs. We observed the planet for 3 days but never obtained visual confirmation. The predators may be nocturnal, subterranean, or possess advanced camouflage abilities. A delegate from the Pleasant Harmonies Collective, a species of flying beings who communicated through song, spoke up. What of the intelligent life you mentioned? The radio signals? We believe they survive by avoiding these predators, perhaps underground or in oceanic settlements. The radio signals suggest a desperate species, possibly calling out for rescue. Vesithor brought up the drone footage. We observed small bipedal creatures in various locations, but they appear to be prey animals, possibly domesticated by or serving the predators in some capacity. The council chamber filled with worried murmurs. The discovery of a death world, as such planets were classified, was always concerning. But a death world with potential hostages, a species trapped by predators, demanded action. Then a harsh laugh cut through the discussion. Commander Zrak of the Krell Dominion rose from his pod. The Krell were warriors, the only species in the Council who had achieved spaceflight through conquest rather than cooperation. They stood 3 meters tall, covered in thick armored plates with 4 arms ending in claws. The Krell had been allowed into the Council only after agreeing to limit their expansion and follow peaceful protocols. The Zetharians flee from animal noises, Zrak said, his voice dripping with contempt. This is why scientists should not explore alone. Those roars mean nothing. Sounds cannot hurt you. My warriors have conquered predators on 100 worlds. Commander Zrak, the speaker interjected. The Zetharians followed proper safety protocols. Unknown predators of significant size pose real danger. Then send someone who does not fear danger, Zrak replied. The Krell Dominion volunteers to handle this situation. We will eliminate these predators and rescue whatever sentient species cowers on that world. Then we shall establish a protectorate over the grateful survivors. Several delegates protested. The Krell were always looking for opportunities to expand their influence, and a protectorate was just a polite word for conquest. But others argued that something needed to be done. If intelligent beings were trapped on a predator-ruled world, the Council had a moral obligation to help. After 3 hours of debate, a decision was reached. The Krell would be allowed to send a military expedition to Earth, but under strict Council oversight. They were authorized to eliminate hostile predators and make contact with the sentient species. Any protectorate arrangement would need Council approval. Zrak accepted the terms with barely concealed triumph. We shall depart immediately. 12 warships should be sufficient. Lieutenant Kree approached Vesithor after the session ended. Captain, I have a bad feeling about this. We don't know enough about that world. What if we're missing something? I agree, Vesithor said quietly. But the Council has decided. We can only hope the Krell succeed where we failed. Far across the galaxy, humanity remained blissfully unaware of the discussion about their world, but they would not remain unaware for long. 3 days after the Council session, the Deep Space Monitoring Station in orbit around Mars detected something impossible. 12 objects had appeared at the edge of the solar system, decelerating from faster-than-light speeds. The objects were massive, each one larger than any ship humanity had ever built. General Sarah Chen stood in the command center of UEDF headquarters, watching the tracking data with growing dread. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come. Humanity had sent radio signals into space for over a century, always hoping someone would answer. But somewhere in the back of everyone's mind was the dark possibility that the answer might not be friendly. How long until they reach Earth? She asked. At current speed, 14 hours, replied the tracking officer. General, they're not slowing down. They're heading straight for us. Chen activated the Global Defense Network. Alarms began sounding in military bases across Earth. Soldiers who had trained for this scenario, never believing it would actually happen, scrambled to their posts. Nuclear submarines surfaced to establish secure communication. Fighter pilots raced to their aircraft. Ground forces mobilized. The news spread across Earth in minutes. Alien ships approaching. Unknown intentions. Every screen on the planet showed the same images. 12 massive vessels, clearly artificial, clearly advanced, heading toward Earth. Some people celebrated, believing first contact would bring wisdom and peace. Others panicked, remembering every invasion story humanity had ever told itself. Governments issued statements calling for calm while simultaneously preparing for war. Chen established a live feed with world leaders. We will attempt communication, she told them. But we must prepare for the possibility that they are hostile. All military forces are authorized to defend Earth by any means necessary. The UEDF sent broadcast messages in every mathematical language they could devise. Welcome messages, peace offerings, simple statements that they came in friendship. No response came from the approaching fleet. Aboard the Krell flagship Domination's Edge, Commander Zrak studied the scanner readings. The small bipedal creatures were more advanced than the Zetharians had reported. They had satellites, primitive weapons platforms, and were launching vessels to intercept his fleet. They defend the predators, Zrak observed. Perhaps they are symbiotic creatures evolved to serve. Eliminate their vessels, but try to avoid excessive casualties. Once we remove the predators, these beings will be grateful for liberation. The Krell fleet did not slow. They came to conquer predators and save prey. They had no idea that humanity was both, that the roars and the civilization were one, and they would not understand their mistake until it was far too late. The first shots of humanity's first interstellar war were fired in orbit above Earth, and they were fired by humanity. General Chen had given the order with a heavy heart. The approaching fleet had ignored every attempt at communication. They were spreading out into attack formation, and then their weapons had begun charging, energy signatures bright on every scanner humanity possessed. All defense platforms, open fire. All submarines, launch authorization granted. Nuclear missiles streaked upward on pillars of fire. Railgun platforms in high orbit spat projectiles at relativistic speeds. Laser defense systems painted targeting data across the sky. Humanity threw everything they had at the approaching fleet. The Krell shields absorbed most of the assault. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's. But the sheer volume of incoming fire surprised them. A few missiles penetrated weakened shields. Explosions blossomed against alien hulls. Alarms sounded aboard 3 Krell ships as they sustained minor damage. They fight back, Shrak's tactical officer reported, surprise evident in his voice. The prey creatures have weapons. They are protecting their predator masters, Zrak growled. Subservient species often develop weapons to serve their overlords. Return fire. Target their weapon platforms only. We are liberators, not executioners. The Krell warships opened fire. Plasma beams lanced down from orbit. 3 defense satellites simply ceased to exist. A railgun platform tumbled toward Earth, its crew of 40 gone in an instant. Humanity's orbital defenses, built over 50 years at tremendous cost, were being dismantled in minutes. But humans had learned one thing very well over thousands of years of warfare. When you cannot win a fight, you change the battlefield. All orbital forces, fall back to atmospheric defense positions, Chen ordered. Ground forces prepare for landing. If they want Earth, they'll have to come down and take it. The Krell fleet achieved orbit and began scanning the surface. Zrak studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The prey creatures had fought bravely, but they lacked the technology to truly threaten his ships. Now came the important part, locating and eliminating the predators. Scanner readings show the largest concentrations of the bipedal creatures here. His officer indicated several cities, but I'm also detecting them in scattered formations across this continent. The predators hide in population centers, using the bipeds as shields, Zrak said. Clever beasts. We will avoid the cities for now. Deploy ground forces to the open areas. Draw the predators out. Once we have eliminated them, the bipeds will understand we come as saviors. The first Krell dropships descended over Central Europe. They chose a broad valley in Germany, relatively unpopulated but with clear sight lines, perfect for a confrontation with large predators. 10,000 Krell warriors disembarked, each standing 3 meters tall, armored with advanced materials, armed with plasma weapons that could melt through steel. They established a defensive perimeter and waited. On Earth, satellite feeds showed the landing to every command center. Chen watched the alien deployment with the eyes of someone who had spent 30 years studying military tactics. They're in a defensive position. They're waiting for something. Waiting for what? Asked the French president watching from Paris. I don't know, Chen admitted. But they chose that location for a reason. They want us to come to them. Then we will oblige, said the German chancellor. The 10th Panzer Division is 30 kilometers away. British Royal Marines are being airlifted to positions north of the landing zone. American forces are en route. Tell them to be careful, Chen said. We don't know what those weapons can do. The military forces converged on the location. Tanks rolled across farmland, crushing fences and crops in their urgency. Armored personnel carriers raced down highways. Helicopters thundered through the sky. And in the backs of trucks and APCs, soldiers checked their weapons and tried to control their fear. Sergeant James McLeod sat in the back of a British transport, watching his men. They were Royal Marines, the best Britain could field, but they had trained to fight other humans, not aliens. Some looked eager. Some looked terrified. All of them were going anyway. "Listen up," McLeod said, his thick Scottish accent cutting through the engine noise. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But those things down there attacked our home. They killed our people in orbit, and now they're sitting on German soil like they own it." He stood up, having to crouch under the low ceiling. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten Earth. We're going to show them why humans have been the apex predators on this planet for 200,000 years, and we're going to do it together." The soldiers looked at him, finding courage in his certainty. "When we get there, when the order comes, I want you to remember something. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every human who ever lived, every ancestor who fought off predators with nothing but stones and fire. That's in your blood. That's who we are." The convoy halted 2 kilometers from the alien position. Soldiers deployed into formation. Tanks took up firing positions. The morning mist clung to the ground, giving everything an ethereal quality. Through that mist, humans and aliens saw each other clearly for the first time. The Krell warriors stared at the approaching force with confusion. These were the small bipedal creatures they had seen in the Zetharian footage. But there were so many of them, and they moved with military precision. And they were bringing vehicles, weapons, coordinated formations. "Where are the predators?" a Krell warrior asked his commander. "Perhaps these creatures are the Predator's army," the commander suggested. "Wait, we must see the enemy before we fire." The human forces halted 500 meters from the Krell position. Silence fell across the battlefield. 10,000 Krell warriors faced approximately 8,000 human soldiers. Both sides waited, neither quite understanding what they faced. Then a human vehicle moved forward. Speakers had been attached to it, amplifying sound across the misty valley. A single voice emerged from those speakers, loud enough to make the Krell flinch. "Soldiers of Earth," the voice boomed. It was General Chen speaking from her command center, but her words carried to every soldier present. "Today we face an enemy from beyond our world. They came to our home. They attacked our defenses. They stand on our soil." The Krell adjusted their weapons, still waiting for the massive predators. "But we are not afraid," Chen continued. "We are the inheritors of a warrior tradition older than civilization itself. We are the descendants of hunters who brought down mammoths with spears. We are the children of soldiers who held the line against impossible odds throughout history. We are human. And this is our planet." McLeod felt his heart pounding. He looked at his men and saw the same fire building in their eyes. This was the moment. This was why they trained. This was why humans throughout history had prepared young men and women for war. Chen's voice rose to a crescendo. "Let them hear what it means to challenge humanity. Let them understand what they have awakened. Soldiers of Earth." The Krell warriors tensed, scanning the mist for the predators that surely must be coming. "Charge!" And then it happened. The sound that had terrified the Zetharians, the roars they had mistaken for monsters, erupted across the battlefield. But now the Krell understood what the Zetharians had not. The roars came from the small bipeds. 8,000 human voices rose in a simultaneous battle cry, a sound of rage and determination that had echoed across battlefields for millennia. The Krell warriors, veterans of 100 conflicts, felt something they had rarely experienced. Fear, because the predators weren't coming. The predators were already here, and they were charging. The Battle of the Rhine Valley would be studied by military historians across the galaxy for generations, not because of its scale, which was relatively small by interstellar standards, but because it was the moment the galaxy learned what humanity truly was. The human charge struck the Krell lines like a hammer. Tanks fired on the move, their shells slamming into alien shields with thunderous impacts. Infantry fighting vehicles disgorged soldiers who moved with practiced precision, finding cover and laying down suppressing fire. Attack helicopters roared overhead, missiles streaking toward alien positions. But it was the human soldiers themselves that truly shocked the Krell warriors. They were so small. Each Krell stood 3 meters tall, and weighed over 300 kilograms of armored muscle. Each human soldier barely reached 2 meters and weighed less than 100 kilograms. By all logical assessment, the Krell should have crushed them easily. They did not. The humans moved like they had been designed for war. They coordinated through hand signals and radio chatter, speaking in clipped phrases that conveyed maximum information with minimum words. They used cover aggressively, advancing in leapfrog patterns that kept the Krell under constant fire. And they kept roaring, kept shouting, kept making those terrible sounds that bypassed logic and struck directly at the fear centers of the brain. A Krell warrior raised his plasma rifle at a group of charging humans. Before he could fire, a tank shell struck his position. He survived, his personal shield absorbing the impact, but the concussion stunned him. In that moment of disorientation, 3 human soldiers were on him. They moved like pack hunters, coordinating without speaking, flanking him with a speed he couldn't match. One human fired a burst into his shield, draining its energy. Another threw a cylindrical object that exploded near his feet, the shockwave knocking him down. The third human was suddenly on top of him, driving a knife between his armor plates. The Krell warrior died, staring into forward-facing predator eyes, finally understanding the Zetharian's fear. This scene repeated across the battlefield. The Krell had superior technology, stronger bodies, and better shields. But humanity had something the Krell had forgotten over centuries of easy conquests: the absolute refusal to quit. When a human soldier's weapon jammed, they picked up rocks. When their position was overrun, they fell back and regrouped. When they were wounded, they kept fighting. When they were trapped, they found a way out. And when they were scared, they roared louder. Sergeant McLeod led his squad through a gap in the Krell line. They had lost 2 men already, but the survivors moved with even greater fury. A Krell warrior stepped out from behind a damaged vehicle, plasma rifle aimed at McLeod's chest. "Get down!" one of his men shouted, tackling McLeod as the plasma bolt seared over their heads. McLeod rolled to his feet, brought up his rifle, and fired a burst into the alien's face shield. The shield held, but the Krell staggered. McLeod didn't stop. He charged forward, roaring like his Celtic ancestors had roared when they painted their faces blue and charged Roman legions. He slammed into the Krell with his shoulder, using the alien's momentary imbalance to drive his combat knife up under the edge of its helmet. The Krell fell. McLeod stood over it, breathing hard, his face spattered with alien blood. His squad regrouped around him. "That's 3, one of them said, grinning despite the terror in his eyes. "Keep moving," McLeod ordered. "They're starting to break." And they were. The Krell warriors, who had conquered planets without losing a single soldier, found themselves in a fight they couldn't win through technology alone. The humans were everywhere, adapting to every tactic, exploiting every weakness. When the Krell formed defensive squares, human artillery shattered them. When the Krell spread out, human squads isolated and destroyed them. When the Krell tried to retreat to their landing ships, human snipers picked them off. Commander Zrak watched his tactical display with growing horror. Half his ground force was combat ineffective. The other half was fighting for their lives against an enemy that should have been easy prey. His dropships were being destroyed by human aircraft. And those terrible roars kept echoing across the battlefield, coordinated war cries that somehow made his warriors hesitate. "All forces, retreat to the landing zone," he ordered. "Orbital support, provide covering fire." Plasma beams lanced down from orbit, forcing the human forces back. The surviving Krell warriors fought their way to their ships, dragging their wounded with them. They had come as conquerors. They fled as survivors. As the last Krell dropship lifted off, pursued by missiles and gunfire, Zrak stared at the view screen showing the battlefield below. The small bipedal creatures were regrouping, already preparing for the next fight. He finally understood what the Zetharians had tried to warn them about. "Contact all ships," he said quietly. "We are leaving this system. Immediately." "Commander?" his tactical officer asked, confused. "We still have orbital superiority. We can bombard their positions from space." "No," Zrak said. "Send a message to the Galactic Council. Priority 1. We have made a grave error. There are no separate predators on this world. The small bipeds are the predators. They are the ones who make the roars, and they are more dangerous than anything we have ever encountered. But we have superior technology, the officer protested. Jacques gestured to the casualty reports scrolling across his screen. Technology means nothing if you hesitate, if you doubt, if you fear. These humans have weaponized fear itself. They roar to build their courage and destroy ours. They charge into enemy fire because they believe they will win. And that belief makes them stronger than their weapons. He looked at the display one last time before the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives. We are warriors. We have conquered 100 worlds. But these humans, they are something else. They are born for war, evolved for it. Every instinct, every reflex honed over millions of years to make them perfect hunters. We walked onto a predator world and challenged the apex species. We are fortunate to escape with our lives. Back on Earth, General Chen watched the alien fleet disappear from her screens. The command center erupted in cheers, but she remained silent. They had won the first battle, but this was far from over. Somewhere out in the galaxy, other species would hear about today. Some would see humanity as a threat. Others might see them as potential allies. Everything would change. A communication officer approached her.
General, we're receiving thousands of messages from civilian leaders. They want to know if it's over. Tell them the truth, Chen said. We won the battle. We drove them off. But they'll be back, or someone else will come. Today we announced our presence to the galaxy.
Now we have to deal with the consequences. In the valley where the battle had been fought, soldiers walked among the wreckage. Medics treated the wounded. Engineers documented the alien technology. And Sergeant McLeod sat on the ground, his rifle across his knees, looking at the sky where the alien ships had vanished. One of his men sat beside him. You think they'll come back, Sergeant? McLeod was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled grimly. Maybe. But if they do, they'll remember what happened here. They'll remember the sound of humans charging into battle. They'll remember that we don't quit. And maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice before attacking Earth again. He stood up, offering his hand to help his soldier to his feet. Come on, we've got work to do. They know we're here now. Time to make sure they know we're staying. Above them, the sky was clear and blue. But beyond that sky, across the vast distances of space, a message was spreading. A message that would change humanity's place in the universe forever. The message was simple and terrifying. Humanity roars before it charges. And when humanity charges, nothing stops it. 6 months after the Battle of the Rhine Valley, Captain Vesthor stood once again before the Galactic Council. But this time he was not alone. Standing beside him in a specially constructed environmental pod was General Sarah Chen of Earth, the first human to address the assembled species of the galaxy. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Every species present had heard the stories. The Krell, undefeated in 5 centuries of expansion, had been routed by a species that still used chemical propulsion for their spacecraft. The footage of the battle had spread through every communication network in known space, and that sound, those terrible roars, haunted the dreams of species who had thought themselves safe in a civilized galaxy. The speaker called the session to order. We gather today to address the membership application of the species known as humanity. General Chen, you may speak. Chen stepped forward, her posture military straight, her uniform pressed and decorated with medals from the recent conflict. She had spent the last 6 months learning galactic protocols, studying alien psychology, and preparing for this moment. The fate of Earth hung on her words. Honored representatives, she began, her words translated into 200 languages simultaneously. 6 months ago, my species experienced first contact in the worst possible way. We were attacked without warning, without communication, without understanding why. We defended ourselves because we had no other choice. She gestured, and a holographic display activated showing Earth. My world has known war. We have fought each other for thousands of years. We have refined violence into an art form. We are not proud of this history, but we do not deny it. We are predators. We evolved to hunt, to fight, to survive against creatures larger and stronger than ourselves. Murmurs spread through the council. Several species shifted uncomfortably. Chen continued. But we are also builders. scientists, artists, philosophers. We have created beauty and meaning despite our violent nature. We have slowly, painfully learned to cooperate with each other. We hoped that when we met other intelligent species, we could extend that cooperation to the stars. She looked directly at the Krell delegation. Commander Zrak sat in his pod, his armor stripped of military honors. The Krell had been censured by the Council for the unauthorized attack. They had lost face, lost standing, lost the respect they had built over centuries. The Krell attacked us because they misunderstood us, Chen said. They heard our war cries and thought we were monsters. But those roars, those battle cries, they are not the sounds of mindless beasts. They are the sounds of humans building courage in each other, of humans refusing to give in to fear, of humans standing together against impossible odds. She paused, letting her words sink in. We roar because we are afraid. And we learned millions of years ago that fear is easier to face together. That fear is easier to face when you make noise, when you remind yourself and your companions that you are not alone. We weaponized our own fear response and turned it into strength. Captain Vesthor watched Chen speak and felt a strange mixture of shame and admiration. His species had fled from sounds without understanding them. The Krell had attacked without communicating. Both had assumed that aggression meant absence of intelligence, that predation meant absence of civilization. We asked the Council to accept us as members, Chen concluded, not despite our nature, but with full understanding of what we are. We are warriors when we must be, but we would rather be partners. We would rather build than destroy. We would rather roar in celebration than in battle. The Council deliberated for 3 hours. Some species argued that humanity was too dangerous, too aggressive, too militaristic. Others argued that humanity had only defended itself, that they had shown restraint even in victory. The Krell could have been destroyed in orbit, their ships shattered by nuclear weapons. Instead, humanity had fought a ground battle and allowed them to retreat. Finally, the speaker announced the decision. By vote of 147 to 53, humanity is accepted into the Galactic Council as a probationary member. You will be monitored for 1 standard galactic year, approximately 3 of your Earth years. During this time, you will have limited voting rights but full access to galactic trade and knowledge networks. Chen bowed respectfully. Humanity accepts these terms. Thank you for this opportunity. But the truly surprising part came next. The speaker continued. Additionally, by emergency vote, humanity is granted an unusual designation. You are classified as an apex recruitment species. This means other species may request human military advisors, trainers, and consultants. This designation is rarely granted and comes with significant responsibilities. Chen blinked, not quite understanding. I'm sorry, could you explain? A delegate from a small species called the Prin stood to speak. They were barely a meter tall, herbivores who had been conquered twice by aggressive neighbors before the Council intervened. General Chen, we watched your battle. We saw how your soldiers fought together, how they refused to quit. For species like mine, who have no warrior tradition, no history of aggression, your example is inspiring. Another delegate spoke up. From a species of aquatic beings. We have technology but no courage. Our people freeze when confronted with violence. Could your warriors teach ours to face fear? Chen looked around the chamber with growing understanding. The galaxy had plenty of species with advanced technology, but most of them were peaceful, had evolved without significant predation, had never needed to develop the psychological tools to face violence. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their mindset. We would be honored to help, Chen said carefully, but we would not teach others to be aggressive. We would teach them to be courageous. There is a difference. That difference is why we approved this designation, the speaker said. Humanity understands the balance. You are predators who chose cooperation, warriors who seek peace. You are what the galaxy needs. The months that followed were transformative for both humanity and the galaxy. Human military advisors were sent to 12 worlds. They taught alien soldiers things they had never considered. How to build unit cohesion through shared hardship. How to face fear by acknowledging it. How to turn the chaos of battle into coordinated action. And yes, how to roar. Sergeant McLeod found himself on a world orbiting a distant star, training a unit of insectoid soldiers who had never raised their voices above a whisper. They were terrified of everything, despite having advanced weapons and armor. Right then, McLeod said, standing before 100 alien soldiers who towered over him, you've got all the gear. You've got the training. But you're still afraid. Want to know why? The soldiers clicked and chittered their response, which his translator rendered as cautious agreement. Because you're trying to be brave alone, McLeod said. Every one of you is standing here thinking you're the only one who's scared. You're not. You're all scared. I'm scared half the time myself. Fear is natural. It's how you handle fear that matters. He demonstrated the techniques humanity had refined over millennia, shouting cadences while running to build unity, battle cries to release tension and build courage, coordinated movements with verbal cues, simple things but things these species had never considered. Now when I give the signal, I want all of you to yell as loud as you can. McLeod instructed. Don't worry about sounding stupid. Don't worry about being proper. Just let it out, ready? The alien soldiers looked at each other uncertainly. Their species was quiet by nature, rarely making loud noises. But they trusted this small human who had fought against the legendary Krell and survived. McLeod raised his hand, then brought it down sharply. Now! The sound that emerged was uncertain at first. 100 different vocalizations that didn't quite mesh. But McLeod kept encouraging them, kept showing them how to synchronize, how to feed off each other's energy. And slowly, the uncertain noise transformed into something else, something unified, something powerful. The alien soldiers felt it. That strange sensation of being part of something larger than themselves, of not being alone in their fear. They roared again, stronger this time, their voices rising together. McLeod smiled. That's it. That's the sound that makes empires hesitate. That's the sound that tells your enemy you're not prey. You're predators too. You just needed to remember how to show your teeth. Back on Earth, Captain Vesithor had requested permission to visit. He wanted to understand the species he had so completely misunderstood. General Chen personally gave him a tour of a military base. You are not what we expected, Vesithor admitted as they watched soldiers training. We thought predators would be savage, uncontrolled. But you are disciplined, organized. That's because we're not just predators, Chen explained. We're social predators. We survived by working together. A human alone is dangerous. 100 humans working together? That's an army. That's what you heard in those roars. Not individual aggression, but collective strength. They watched as a drill instructor led his troops through training exercises. The soldiers roared in unison, a sound that still made Vesthor flinch slightly despite knowing it was harmless. Why do you still do it? Vesithor asked. You know the galaxy finds it frightening. Why not stop?